Hello and welcome to another episode. Now in today's video we're checking out some of the most dangerous surf destinations in the world. I've compiled this list based on a few different factors including heavy waves, gnarly locals, high crime statistics, likelihood of natural disaster. First up we've got the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii. Now it's no secret that Hawaii has got some of the scariest waves on earth. So the fact that the waves here are just so heavy and move with so much power and force and just the intensity of the crowd and the vibe of the place and the localism just makes it one of the gnarliest, most dangerous surf destinations in the world. Next up we've got Mexico. Now Mexico is a world-class surf destination, but Mexico also has a bad reputation for crime statistics.
Former tourist hotspot has one of the highest murder rates in the world.
So in 2022 Mexico was number 27 in the most dangerous countries in the world. Now, this is a list compiled by the Global Peace Index, which is based on factors such as terrorism risk, politics, deaths, murder rates, homicide rates, all of these different factors. It was by far the highest well-established surf destination on the list. For example, countries above it only included ones like Afghanistan, Yemen, Iraq, lots of places in Africa, lots of places that were at war. Mexico is notorious for its drugs and gang crime and violence and high murder rates, but to be honest, in the major surf towns, you're not going to be exposed to a lot of this, which is somewhat naive to think because, you know, it can still go on in places like Acapulco, for example, in Tijuana as well. You know, they've got very high crime rates and, you know, they are destinations where there are fun waves. But in the major surf towns like Sayulita, Puerto Escondido, Barra de la Cruz, Salina Cruz, you're not necessarily going to be exposed to that sort of crime. Going to be more at risk to like more petty crime rather than like extreme gang violence. So turning our attention to the water, there's a lot of power in the waves in Mexico. Even like Barra de la Cruz, Salina Cruz, these waves are like fun, amazing waves, relatively easy to surf, but they're very powerful, very hollow, breaking close to rocks, breaking across shallow sand. So the waves are no joke in Mexico, and especially if you're a more intermediate surfer, it's definitely going to be a factor in your trip. In addition to this, you've got some pretty gnarly localism in Mexico. I definitely saw a few fights and a few arguments happen in the water in Mexico, especially in Oaxaca down south. Found in Mexico, like, I love the country, I love Mexico, I'll definitely be going back next year, but there's always this kind of like looming sense of risk as well. The main surf season, so between April and October, is hurricane season, so you've got pretty frequent hurricanes that track along that Pacific coast. When I was there, we had a major hurricane where it actually washed away a few lower lying towns and it was pretty scary. So with a combination of those sort of 3 or 4 different factors, Mexico is definitely going on the list of the most dangerous surf destinations. Next up, we've got Brazil. Now, again, like Mexico, Brazil is another country where you think of it and danger and crime instantly comes to mind. Now, whether this is fair or not is up for debate. It depends where you go. Areas of Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro are super dangerous, you know, favelas run by drug gangs. You've got a lot of crime, lots of murders. There's a lot of petty crime as well, so it's definitely something you've got to watch out for. So Brazil sits just behind Mexico on the GPI's most dangerous countries list at number 34. I found though, to be honest, in Brazil, in a lot of the surf towns, I did feel safe, with the exception of maybe in Rio at nighttime. You know, if I was walking back from a restaurant or bar or something, I was definitely a little bit more alert. But, you know, around the beaches of Ipanema and Barra da Tijuca, there feel safe. There's a lot of police around, which I don't know if that made me feel more scared or more safe. Next up, we've got South Africa. Now, again, like Brazil, like Mexico, South Africa has definitely got high crime rates. 2022 to 2023, the per capita murder rate in South Africa was the highest it's been for 20 years, which is 45 per 100,000 residents, which is super, super high. Again, while a lot of this crime happens in like South Africa's more dangerous pockets, you know, parts of downtown Johannesburg, Cape Town, specifically in the Cape Flats, a lot of the crime happens in these places, so obviously you're not going to go there as a surfer. But still in surf town, like robberies, like carjackings, all that, muggings, all that kind of thing can still happen. So you just got to be careful and be vigilant, like always locking your car, not leaving valuables there. Like I felt pretty safe when I was in J Bay and stuff, you know. I was never like looking over my shoulder like, oh shit, but then I was never like, you know, out in a sketchy place at nighttime by myself. I was always pretty careful. Another thing in South Africa as well, they tell you not to drive at night because this is when, you know, cars can get targeted. I know a lot of you watching this are from South Africa or have been there, so please let me know of any stories or helpful information for anybody going to South Africa. You know, if somebody's worried about coming and visiting South Africa, what can they do to stay safe, and will they be fine in, you know, say J Bay, Durban, Cape Town? Any information would be massively appreciated, so please comment down below. The other aspect of South Africa's like danger as a surf destination as well is sharks. Obviously, South Africa is one of the sharkiest surf destinations in the world. If you haven't already, check out my breakdown to the sharkiest surf destinations up there. The Eastern Cape, Western Cape, incredibly sharky parts of the world. There's been a lot of attacks and a lot of fatalities in the Eastern Cape specifically. That's always kind of at the back of your mind, you know, when you're surfing in South Africa. So last but not least, we've got El Salvador. So El Salvador is somewhat synonymous with gang violence and, you know, murder. It used to have one of the highest murder rates in the world. You know, it's notorious for its gangs, you know, Barrio 18, those. We've all heard of the gang violence out of El Salvador. In recent years, you know, the country has cleaned up its act. The government and the military has cracked down on gang violence, you know. It's a lot safer than it used to be. That said, I still wouldn't go down into downtown San Salvador, you know, at nighttime by yourself and expect not to get robbed. There's still crime that's present, but again, like many of the destinations on our list, like where the main surf spots are, you know, in El Tunco specifically, I felt very safe. I felt it was like a bubble town kind of cut off from the rest of the country, and the security, you know, around El Tunco, so you kind of feel safe, like you're in this like weird bubble. But as soon as I went outside that, I was definitely like a lot more alert. I mean, probably over necessarily alert, but yeah, definitely wouldn't head to San Salvador, you know, kind of by myself at night or anything like that. Don't even have to go into San Salvador itself, to be honest. The airport in El Salvador is actually located closer to the coast, so it's not even in San Salvador. It's like 45 minutes away from El Tunco, so you can kind of bypass that part of the country anyway. It's not necessarily a factor, but that said, you know, petty crime, like robberies, muggings, jackings, that kind of thing can still be pretty common wherever you go in El Salvador. So if you're hiring a car or, you know, you're going off to explore some other waves, you've definitely got to be aware of that as well. Some honorable mentions as well for other dangerous surf destinations. You've got Colombia. Now, while this is definitely not like an established surf destination, I know there are fun waves there. Parts of Chile, which is surprising to a lot of people, are very, very rough, very dangerous. I found this in Arica. It's not necessarily safe to walk around at night. Downtown Santiago as well, if you're passing through there, pretty dangerous place to be around. So yeah, obviously there's other places in the world where you can go and surf that are a lot more dangerous than these places, but you know, I think danger is always relative, and I've tried to compile this list of like established surf destinations rather than like the more off the beaten track places, because I know I'll get the comments where somebody will be like, oh yeah, well you can surf in Yemen, so that's more dangerous than, you know, Mexico. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, but let's, yeah, look at this list of like established destinations. These are some of the highest crime rates in the world. But again, like anywhere, as long as you're vigilant, you're, you know, putting into practice all of like the normal safety vigilance that you would anywhere in the world, and you're sticking to these main surf towns, you'll generally be fine. At least that's in my experience. Please let me know if you've had any gnarly experiences in these countries. I always love to hear your guys' stories of surf travels and sketchy situations, you know, so if you've got any good ones, please fire away down below. For now, it's goodbye from me, and I'll see you in the next episode.